We just going to do a quick review of brain states. We went over them pretty significantly last week, but I know we kind of got rushed at the end. So I think it's worth revisiting because this is going to be a very helpful tool, it's very helpful for you to know as early childhood educators about brain states, because it impacts how children learn and when they are ready to learn, right? So remember that each of the states are tied to a certain portion of your brain. And remember, we did the hand model, right? So you take your hand, you put your thumb in, that's where your amygdala is and where you are, where your emotions are being controlled, right? And then this is the prefrontal cortex. So that's your executive state. That's that green area on the screen. Your emotional state is this thumb area, right? The blue part. And then your survival state is, if you're looking at your wrist, you can think of that as like your brainstem. So that's so when we start to see children begin to go into their emotional state and even their survival state, you can, if you want to call it, like flip your lid. So your prefrontal cortex is going to go out the door in those moments, right? Because your emotional state is going to be controlled by your amygdala. And if the situation is extreme for a child, they're going to go into their survival state, which is in their brainstem. Okay. So just a quick review of these slides again. So in the survival state, your child would be in their, or anyone, these brain states aren't just for children, they're for all of us, right? So you're in your fight, flight, or freeze response. And can a child listen to reason or learn a new skill when they're in their survival state? Yes or no? Okay, we'll start. We'll pull our little baggie of names, since you're all being so polite and letting everybody else go first. Alicia.
I think maybe no, because they can't focus. They're just crying and,
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. When you're in your survival state, all of your energy is going to survival, right? There's no sitting down and learning how to build a block tower. You're trying to decide if you're going to live or die, right? That's survival, right? Okay. So thank you, Annalicia. Our next state is the emotional state, right? And so this is when you're watching a child or experiencing yourself intense emotional reactions to a situation or intense emotions. So when you're in your emotional state, you're going to see behaviors like yelling, maybe ignoring, blaming, name calling, kind of like lashing out behaviors, right? So when you are in an emotional state, you are trying to figure out if you are safe and if you are loved. And by loved, it means, am I going to be cared for? Am I going to have my needs met? Okay. So let me pull out a name here. Adriana, can a child learn when they are in their emotional state?
I think they can, but it's not like the ideal state, because they still thinking, am I safe and am I loved?
Yes. Yeah, I would say that you're right about that. It's very difficult for a child to learn in this state. So when they're in an emotional state, for example, and we've probably all seen a child have maybe what some of us call a meltdown or a tantrum. I don't like those words because these are, emotions are normal and how children exhibit them are normal, but those are the kinds of the ways that we think of them, right? So if a child's having an intense emotional situation, are they going to be able to really listen to you if you say, hey, you need to calm down, or you need to see if your friend is okay because you just yelled at your friend and I think your friend is sad. So do you think those kinds of things are going to be effective when a child is in an intense emotional state? Betsy.
No, I don't think so. Because the whole time the kid's just gonna be, I feel like they like try to calm down and want to like try to participate, but then it just goes back to like, I'm crying because this, like this and this and this, and they will just keep going back to thinking, like reminding themselves to cry.
Yeah, so they're just in this intense emotional place, right? Where it's just, that's kind of where their brain is focused on is their emotions. Am I safe? Am I loved right now? Right. And when a child is, feeling really angry or really frustrated about something, they want to know if their needs are going to be met. We'll talk more about that in a little bit here. Thank you. Okay, so then our next brain state is the executive state. So remember, it's tied to our hand model. Here is our prefrontal cortex, right? This is where our executive function and executive state are housed. So this state asks, what can I learn? So this is the state where children are ready and receptive to learning, right? They're engaged with other people in positive ways. They're able to manage their behavior even when they start to experience intense emotions. And they're able to do things like problem solving and making logical choices and things like that, right? So that's just a quick overview of the brain states. But before we move into our next piece here, does anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts about brain states?
Doesn't it like also depend, like how you said, can a child learn what brain state that they're in? That all depends on like how old they are, right? And like how developed their brain is and like what they can comprehend of like emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. Just another quick question. Are you seeing my slides? I don't think you are. You are, okay. Usually,
yeah, I can see them.
Okay. Usually gives me a little like line or something. I don't know. I don't see that. So, okay. Yeah, Cheyenne, that's a great point. Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts? So last week we watched some videos, right, of some children in some various brain states. And at the very end, this is where we got kind of squished for time. We watched, and they might say his name, I just can't remember. I affectionately call this little boy Peaches, because this is what this is all about, is his Peaches, right? And we're going to watch this again, but this time we're going to look for a couple of things. So put your researcher hat on. Remember, as early childhood educators, you are also researchers. And a couple of things that I want you to be watching this time, we're going to watch for brain states, but we're going to watch for a couple other things. We're going to watch for what is the teacher doing this time. Okay, so what is she, just observe what she's doing, how she's handling this situation. Think about, what she's doing well. Look at and think about what you might do differently as an educator if you would do anything differently. So we're going to talk about that. Then the other thing is that I'm going to pause it like we did last time. And then we're going to identify possible brain states, but we're also going to identify some possible emotions that this child might be feeling or the teacher might be feeling. Okay. So if you want to have your feelings wheel back out again, that might be helpful in this for this exercise. And one other quick little thing I'll say is when we're talking about emotions, let's be as specific as we can get, because we often use, and this is something that I hear teachers use in the classroom all the time, is we use the word upset. I'm upset, you're upset, he's upset, right? That means something to us. We understand what upset means, but what does that mean for a child or to a child? What does upset mean? It doesn't give you a very clear understanding. Are you angry? Because I would say I'm upset if I'm angry. Are you sad? I might say I'm upset if I'm sad. Am I frustrated? I might say I'm upset if I'm frustrated. So we use this word upset a lot, but it's very vague, and it's not necessarily helpful in supporting children in learning their actual feelings, right? So let's try to avoid that word, but be specific about what feelings or emotions you're noticing. That's where our feelings wheel can be very helpful in this activity. Okay, so let me start this video here. Actually, I think I have the right thing shared, but oh, no.
We don't have some more. Don't forget you left those things out. We're gonna throw it in the trash can. I don't have any more.
Okay, so what brain state do we think this little guy is in right now? Just shout out. It's okay if you guess, if you're guessing. If it's not the right guess, we'll get to the right guess.
I think it's executive, right? That's the first one where, because he's still like talking and like he's explaining what he wants and stuff, and it doesn't look like he's like full-fledged upset yet.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Would the rest of you agree with that? Yeah. Yeah, so I would say executive. He's dropped his peaches. He says, uh-oh, I need some more. So he's problem solving, right? When you drop your peaches, you maybe can ask for more peaches, right? So he's problem solving. He's talking calmly. Okay. What do you think he's feeling? What's an emotion that you think he might be feeling? And we don't know for sure, right? We're guessing a little bit, but I think we can make some educated guesses as experienced early childhood educators.
He probably is gonna start feeling like sad or like worried or left out because he can't have any more peaches, because I heard her say that they don't have any more.
Okay, so that's how he might start feeling, but how is he feeling right now?
Disappointed, maybe?
Maybe he's feeling disappointed. Yeah. That might be a feeling that he's experiencing. Is he managing that emotion right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think he's managing his emotions. Any other emotions that you maybe see on the feelings wheel that he might be feeling?
Maybe overwhelmed.
Maybe he's feeling a little overwhelmed. Yeah, that's could be because looked like he was pretty enjoying his peaches, right? Okay. Anything else that you would observe?
I think in a way he's puzzled. He's not, it's like it hasn't really fully processed in his head what's going on and that there really is no more peaches.
Yeah, that's a great observation, Betsy. Thank you. Yeah.
I think they're kind of like, sorry, they're
Okay.
kind of like anxious of like the situation that's happening right now.
Yeah, he could start, he might feel anxious or might start feeling anxious. Very good. Yeah. Yeah, all very educated guesses about his emotions right now. Okay, so let's watch a little bit more. Remember to watch our teacher also. We haven't seen much of what she's about to do here, but watch for her and what her emotions are as well, okay? Or what we can guess them to be.
Peaches, sit down. Look at me. These are dirty. I don't have any more peaches. Would you like some banana?
Zachary, Brianna, and Ryan go wash
That's all
hands.
there is. I'm sorry, Joshua, I didn't throw them before. They're dirty. No, Josh, they're dirty. So you eat your peaches. It's okay, Brittany. Joshua, would you like to get up and have a banana? Miss Leslie, since you're here, Joshua, I'll go in the other room. Huh?
Oh, they don't go
You take
inside.
mine.
Sarah,
I'll take
take them to the shed then, okay. 'Cause mine-
Joshua, you want to get up and have a banana, or do you want to go back to the classroom? Okay, we're going back to the class.
Okay. So now what brain state do you think he's in? Is he still in the executive state or is he shifted into a different state?
He's in an emotional state
His emotional state? Why would you say that he's in the emotional state?
because she asked him, do you want bananas or are you ready to go back to your classroom? And he's telling her no. So he's still like communicating.
Yeah, that's great. Anything else that anybody else would add? I think that's the key right here is that we know he's in the emotional state because we could probably guess that he's now starting to feel some intense emotions by the way he's behaving, right? But he's still communicating with his teacher. So no, I don't want the bananas. I don't want those bananas. I want my peaches. Okay, so what might he be feeling? What emotions might he be experiencing right now?
Probably sad.
Probably sad. Alicia, I think you saw your unmute. You unmute?
Yeah, I was gonna say sad or mad. And one thing she could have done differently was instead of telling him like, oh, I didn't throw them on the floor, she could have just like redirected him right away and said, let's just eat a banana or something, and maybe he wouldn't have had that been
Yeah,
upset.
I noticed that too.
Okay. So maybe how the teacher is handling the situation could be contributing to maybe his emotional state, do you think?
Yeah.
Okay. What else did you observe?
I feel like she took a little bit long to like go and physically like comfort him, but she's not even comforting him. She's just trying to redirect him and kind of like cut it short, like you either want the bananas or you're going somewhere else. And so he said no to the bananas, so then she's moving him, and I think that's gonna end up putting him in the like fight or flight stage because his like immediate need is still not being met.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so when you look at the feelings wheel, you might be toggling back and forth, but you're seeing on one side when your needs are being met, and then on the other side is when your needs are not met. And so when you look at that side and you're looking at those emotions, that's where you're seeing anger, that's where you're seeing sadness, right? So we could say that his needs are not being met right now because what he needed, in his mind, what he needed right now is his peaches, right? Okay. So let's continue to watch this a little bit more.
Quiet, come in here. I'm sorry that you just fell on the floor. And I'm sorry that you didn't get a nap. Joshua, that really hurt.
Okay, so what do we think is happening here? What emotional state is our little boy?
I think he's
I
in
feel like
survival
he's-
state. Oh, sorry.
No, you're okay. I think he's like on the borderline of like oh my gosh, now all the brain
Emotional?
states just yes, emotional and survival. Like
Okay.
he's on the border of them because he did just throw something and then he was screaming, but he also communicated with her and said, "Don't talk to me."
Mhm. Yeah, so he's still communicating. So we think he's probably still hovering in that emotional state somewhere, might be getting close to survival. Anybody else have any observations? What do you think he's experiencing as emotions right now? And let's
Maybe
hear from some of
frust-
our other, yeah, Melina, go for it.
Sorry, maybe frustration. But I think he is like already like in survival stage, because he's having like the physical reactions, like he was like punching her and throwing things at her.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean he's still communicating, but I think he's a little bit more in the survival one.
yeah, so he's probably somewhere in between the two, like from emotional, his behavior's looking like it's getting more intense and he's starting to be more physical with his behavior, throwing things. Yeah, it's a great observation. How about our teacher? How do you think she's feeling right now? And it's hard to tell, we're just guessing, right? We're just guessing, but you could put yourself in this situation. How might you be feeling in this situation? Adriana?
I think she's frustrated since he threw himself at the floor, and but I was just thinking how this little one feels now that he is like removed from his place and everything, and I think he's confused and scared because he didn't expect that, because he was just like saying what he needs, and that's why he's just like, what's going on? I'm only asking for some more peaches.
Yeah,
But yeah, she's getting upset too, I think.
that's a really good observation. You know, you're absolutely right. She kind of swooped him up and took him to this other room, took him away from his group, right? Took him away from his snack. And now he's in this new space. And I think that is a very good assumption that he might be feeling confused, maybe scary even. Yeah. All right, great observations. So let's just watch the rest of this now. Okay, so what happened at the end there?
I don't think the teacher like was necessarily handling it well. Like I know that she started picking things up to avoid him throwing things at her. But the second bin that she picked up that he went to, like she could have like verbally tried to redirect him or kind of just see what he was gonna do, instead of like snatching it away from him. And then also like she's picking up the toys to avoid him throwing them, but that's not what he understands her doing. He just sees her taking away the toys. So I think that doesn't like help his emotional state.
Yeah, that's a great observation. What else did you observe?
And she also, it's modeling, but like not a good model. She's not being like a very good model, but she's modeling that when you are frustrated, when you get mad, when you are upset, just don't talk. Just like do something else. But you don't, she's not teaching him anything. In it's kind of disturbing, honestly, to watch this kind of a yeah, this video for me.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, these are situations that come up in classrooms every day, right? You all have had this experience in some way, shape, or form, either with your own children or in the classroom or observing a family, right? And it's an interesting point that you make, Adriana, about modeling. And also remember that when children slide into those emotional and survival states, their brains are not ready for learning, right? So maybe she made a choice to just give him his space. Maybe she made a choice to be quiet because she didn't want to deal with him. We don't know, right? We don't know. We are only watching this 2-minute video, but those are all things to consider, right? Absolutely. So at the end there, do you think he's still in the emotional state, or do you think he goes into survival?
I would say survival because of how he just like goes and hides in the house instead of trying to like get any more of his problems solved. Like he doesn't try for the peaches anymore. He just goes and sits in the house alone.
Yeah, thanks for that observation, Sadie. Yeah, I think you almost see that shift of his like really intense emotions coming out. And then it's like he just shifts into this other state. And it's hard to tell. He might still be in an emotional state because that can be defiance, right? He might be just feeling defiant, and he's acting in a way to his teacher to be defiant. Or maybe he has slid into that survival state because you see him, he's still throwing things, but he's gotten very quiet, right? And we see what in survival state, children are not communicating anymore. All of their energy is going to survival. So he stops communicating, doesn't he? And he takes himself out of that situation and puts himself in a little house. So hard to tell for sure, but I would agree that he's probably in survival at that point. And remember, only that child can determine if they're in a survival state or not. So even though the teacher might say, oh, he's safe, he's fine, he's loved, he's cared for, only that child can determine if he's in the survival state, right? So as we continue on through our weeks together, we're going to start talking a little bit more about what like toxic stress is, what trauma does, and what trauma is, and how you can really support children and you know, it's normal to be in different brain states, right? But when a child starts experiencing being in the emotional state or in a survival state for extensive periods of time, that can lead to things like toxic stress and trauma, which can affect brain development. So we're gonna be talking a lot more about that over the next few weeks. But we're gonna kind of stay on this idea. I mentioned we're gonna talk a little bit about this idea of what challenging behavior is. So I just want to remind everybody as we're having this conversation, we're going to have a bit of a group conversation first, and then we'll do some small groups here in a few minutes. But just remind everybody that this is our safe space. This is our learning community, so it's safe to share here. And you know, this is how we explore these different ideas of how we think about these as educators, right? So it's important to think about these kinds of things. So I'm just going to ask some questions, and I'm not going to call out names for this particular time, but I want you just to feel free to unmute and share out. So my first question is, would you call Peach's behavior, I think his name is Joshua or something like that. I'm just going to call him Peaches. Is his behavior, would you consider his behavior to be challenging? And why or why not?
No, I don't think so for a teacher, but for him, it's challenging because he is the one feeling them. But, you know, we're taught and trained on how to handle certain situations to help them process their emotions and, you know, feel them and kind of redirect them. And I think that if she would have, you know, maybe done one thing different, the outcome could have been different.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing, Cheyenne. What are some other thoughts? Do you feel like his behavior was challenging?
Sorry, my baby's playing. But no, I don't think it's challenging. I think that's just a normal child. He gets upset because he wanted something and it gets taken away or thrown away. And I mean, you get sad about something like that and he doesn't know how to express it any other way.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thanks for sharing, Sierra.
I think it becomes challenging when, like, I'm just thinking and assuming that maybe the teacher didn't have a good day, or she wasn't like in the right state for that specific child in that specific moment. It could be challenging if you are not like in the executive state. And I think it's very, very important to learn how to be in that, be in that state. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a very, very good point to think about what brain state the teacher is in. What brain state are you in when a child is throwing themselves on the floor, screaming at the top of their lungs for 20 minutes when you're trying to get 14 other children down to sleep for nap time? So it's very important for us to think about what our brain states are, what our emotions are in those moments.
How can we take care of ourselves?
Yeah.
Like, because she maybe could have called for help if she felt like it was just like hard for her to manage at that moment. But yeah, sometimes we just like keep going and keep going and keep going, and we don't pay attention to our own emotions.
Yeah, great point. Absolutely. And is it okay to ask for help if you need help?
Yes, always.
Absolutely. And you have all taken that training, safe use of head trauma and shaken baby, right? It's always better to take a break, to make sure the child is safe, and to take a break and walk away, to compose yourself before you ever, did something to harm a child, right? So doesn't matter that he's not a, a baby, right? This still applies to teenagers, whoever has teenagers in our group, right? Take a break and then come back to, yes. So it doesn't matter what age child, always just make sure they're safe and so that you can be safe, right? What is challenging behavior? What do you think, what comes to mind for you when we talk about challenging behavior? Or what are some of the perceptions? Like, what are some of the, right or wrong? What are some of the ways we use the term or think about challenging behavior? Cheyenne, go ahead.
I think challenging behavior can be presented with kids that have needs, like if kids are on the spectrum. But it's like a two-way street. It could be, obviously it's challenging for the student, but it could be challenging for the teacher in a lot of different ways, because I feel like, if people aren't trained properly on, certain behavioral things that like come with like being on the spectrum, or like, a child with trauma or something, and how they respond to certain things. And then I think like the type of society that we're like in, the first thing that comes to mind to people that probably are not in childcare or new to childcare is like, this kid is being a brat, or this kid is misbehaving, or he's doing it on purpose. And, like in reality, none of those are true. But like when you live or in a society like we do, when people think like that, or like if you're raised like that, then the way to like try to help them becomes challenging, because you're like, oh, stop crying, you're crying for no reason, or something like that, and it kind of just like heightens the kid's emotion, and then it makes your situation more challenging because you don't know like the exact like words to use with them to settle them down, or the like even the body language and stuff that you use to try to like redirect them and whatnot.
Yeah, great points. Thanks, Cheyenne.
I think a challenging behavior could be like when it repeats more than one times. Like, and I was thinking about this example video that you show us. Maybe it wasn't the first time that he was doing that, and maybe it's weird, but sometimes kids like choose a teacher who can they be like challenging with, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And maybe I was thinking like that, maybe it wasn't the first thing that he had this behavior.
Yeah, great point. Other thoughts? What brain state do you think a child might be in to be labeled with challenging behavior?
For me, it would be survival.
Okay.
Yeah, survival for me too.
What about the
For
emotion?
me, it would be survival too, but I think it depends on the teacher, because if you don't know like the states, I think that it would be, I guess, hard to like determine if you don't know, the correct like grammar or stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about the emotional state? Maybe a child is screaming profanities at you. Remember in that state, let me just pull up the slides real quick here so we can remind them. So if you're a child in the emotional state and they're yelling profanities at you and calling you names, maybe it's nap time, right? That's my example. That was always a trigger for me, is when a child was starting to have behaviors during nap time. That might not be a trigger for you, but do you think that sometimes the child's behaviors might be labeled as challenging when you're experiencing something like that? Possibly. So we're talking about this this evening because I want to challenge the idea of what challenging behavior is. It's a term that you hear a lot. It's a term that you hear from everyone from, you know, parents to teachers to school directors to, you know, researchers in the early childhood field. And it's a term that I think is really disappointing to use because, and let's talk about why that is here. So when a child is exhibiting behavior is tied to emotion, right? You behave in a certain way because you're feeling a certain way. And so when we're talking about this question of when might a child's behavior be labeled as challenging, these are some of the times that might come up. So remember that you're working with young children who've only been alive on this earth for maybe a year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. But nevertheless, their brains are still developing, right? They're learning about feelings. These are all age appropriate, developmentally appropriate behaviors for young children. But I think sometimes as a society, we can forget that. Like we just expect children to behave, right? Maybe a child is exhibiting intensive emotional behavior because they're tired or hungry or not feeling well or some other kind of discomfort, meaning that they have an unmet need. Remember how we talked about, I think the first week or so, that babies cry because they have an unmet need. They're communicating to you that they need help with their unmet need. So just as children grow older, they start to develop more vocabulary, but they also start to develop more more emotions, right? So they're now using more vocabulary and more emotions to communicate to you that they have an unmet need. Maybe they're just having a bad day, like we all have. You know, we have all had bad days where we don't want to deal with people or whatever situations. That might just be that child's experience right now. So how can we be more empathetic and understanding in those situations? There might be some developmental delays or even brain injury that might be contributing to some behavior. Could be also a response to traumatic toxic stress or to trauma. Or it could also be tied to a child's race, ethnicity, or gender. This is unfortunately something that happens a lot. You all read an article over the last week about how Black children and Black boys in particular are expelled from preschool at much higher rates than white children. So that has been proven time and time again, or nothing at all. You know, it could be just be a particular teacher who has particular beliefs about how children should behave. And if they're not behaving in the way that teacher believes they should be behaving, then that child's having challenging behavior, right? So just want to be aware of these different factors that go into us labeling a child as having challenging behavior, and to challenge those ideas, to remember that behavior is tied to emotion. Cheyenne, I see your hand is raised.
I just wanted to comment because how we were talking about how it can become toxic stress. When I just had my last child, I learned that toxic stress is even very prominent when the babies are in the mother's womb, because if you're having severe stress as the mom, then it goes all to your baby, and that can really affect your baby's development also.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
I wanted to put that out there because I was like shocked at it. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, me just having a bad day while I'm pregnant can, hurt my child developmentally, essentially, if it's like, severe enough.
yeah, yeah. Thank you, Cheyenne, for sharing that. And that's yeah, a really important point. And we're going to learn a little bit more about what toxic stress is. Remember, some stress is healthy. It helps us figure out how to problem solve situations. But when that stress starts to become more repetitive and children have less coping mechanisms than we do as adults, that can turn into something like toxic stress. So, and that, I feel like this little boy that we watched tonight is probably experiencing something like trauma or toxic stress. He actually, these are educational videos, so they're meant to help, they're meant to help educators learn about behaviors and things like that, but he shows up in a lot of videos. So, which makes me sad, but I think that he's probably experiencing something like that. And we don't know, right? We have no idea, but just from some of the other videos I've seen with some of his behavior, he really doesn't have coping skills. So what that says to me is that he's experiencing something like toxic stress or trauma, which we will learn more about, which is hard, right? These are hard things to think about. They're hard things to talk about. They're hard things to process. But they're so important because, as we've been talking about, you all are in this very unique and special position to support young children and to support families. And so the more knowledge that you have about these things, when you might recognize a sign of toxic stress in a child, so that you might be able to reach out for some services or some support for that family. That can, things like, those kinds of things, the more that we can provide support and services for those experiences that a child might be having, that will still help them to develop in healthy ways. So some of these things just aren't so easy to talk about, but there are some great things that you can do to really support children. And one of the points that conscious discipline really strives to make is that children's behavior is not happening to manipulate you or to make you experience a certain emotion. Only you are in charge of your emotions. So if a child's behavior is making you angry, you're choosing that emotion. You're choosing to be angry. So only you can make those choices. And children are not using behavior to manipulate you. What are they using behavior for instead?
To express themselves.
To express themselves and to tell you that they have what?
A need that needs to be met.
Yes, absolutely. They have a need that needs to be met. So it's your job to kind of figure out what that need is, right? So there are lots of great ways that you can support children. And I realize there's a lot of bullet points on this slide, so I apologize about that, but I did that because you have access to these slides. They're in your student resources folder. So if you ever want to go back and review everything, that's here. But remember that building positive, caring relationships, responsive relationships is just about the most important thing you can do as an early childhood educator to support young children. Young children need positive connection, and especially with their primary caregivers. And you might be a primary caregiver for children, for particular children, especially if you're a teacher in a classroom, right? So lots of serve and return interactions that helps build those positive connections. Learning to identify your own emotions and feelings and triggers, right? So when, you know, it's nap time and somebody's screaming and, you know, I'm trying to get 15 other children to sleep, I know that that's a trigger for me. How am I going to handle my emotions in that moment, right? Practicing your own self-regulation techniques. So one thing that, oh, I skipped one, but I'll go back. One thing that stood out to me is this point about you cannot, or an adult state predicts a child's state. So what that means is that your state is going to impact what brain state a child will be in. So if you're in survival state, a child cannot be in executive state. If you're in fight, flight, or freeze mode, a child that you're working with can't be sitting next to you learning. So your state is going to predict the child's state. So if you're practicing self-regulation techniques, you're practicing emotional awareness, those kinds of things are going to help you to be able to model, to be able to help children learn about their own emotions, and to help you feel more calm and composed in those stressful moments. And so again, and this goes back to self-regulation, but modeling the behavior that you want to see. I think one of you referred to that, or a couple of you referred to that tonight, is, you know, how do we want children? When children walk into our classroom, or, you know, if you're supporting families at home, how do we want children, what kind of behaviors do we want to see? We're not saying that children can't have feelings or emotions. That's not at all what we're saying here. Children should have feelings and emotions, but how we support them and how they learn to regulate their own emotions, respond when they're having emotions, is what we can model for them. So if, you know, somebody takes a toy away from me, I'm not going to scream at the top of my lungs and punch them in the face, right? I'm going to say, oh, that makes me really sad when you took my toy away. So I'm modeling how I can respond in a healthy way, right? A couple other things is, don't take behavior personally. It's not happening to you, right? They're not manipulating you with their behavior. They are seeking connection. They're communicating to you that they have an unmet need, right? We've talked about those things. And, you know, you can really support families in learning about social emotional development, you know, learning about brain states, learning about why learning about emotions is important. You know, for some cultures, maybe talking about feelings or thinking about feelings is not considered to be safe or not considered to be appropriate. So as an educator, you can talk about how to best support children while they're learning about their emotions, because emotions are going to happen whether you talk about them or not, right? And so when you can support families and just helping them learn that this is a very normal and typical part of children's development, you know, then it's not necessarily about going against their culture or their cultural values, but it's just helping them to understand why or how children develop and how we can best support them, right? Okay, so we've talked about a lot of things this evening. Let's just take a couple of minutes to debrief. I know this is, again, sometimes this is stuff that's kind of hard to talk about. And maybe bring up your own feelings. Oftentimes we respond in ways that we were raised by our own families, right? So if you're experiencing any emotions about our conversation tonight, know that that's normal. You know, reach out to a friend or reach out to me if you want to check in later or have, you know, continue having a conversation about some of this stuff. But let me stop talking and turn it back to you and see if there's any final thoughts or comments or reflections before we wrap things up tonight. Okay, we'll take some time to process, take some time for self-care. I know it's been a long day and it's the very end of a very long day. And so we're tired, but also make sure that you're taking time for self-care because that's really important for us as early childhood educators. It's stressful work that we have. And so please make sure that you're taking care of yourself. As we shift into our next couple of weeks, I just want to point out, second, sorry, I've got to open this document real fast here so I can show you. I had it open, I must have accidentally closed it. So if you are following along in your syllabus, or if you remember me telling you a week or two ago, in October, we're gonna also do some modules to learn more about trauma-informed care. And if you look at the syllabus, it's going to tell you something that's going to be a little bit different than what we're actually going to do. So I just wanted to point this out real quick. We are still going to do some module type learning for in addition to our weekly readings and assignments. I'm going to be very thoughtful about how much extra work I'm assigning because the point is not to have you have to do a lot more. But I think these modules on trauma-informed care are very important. And that will really help inform you as early childhood educators. So let me just show this to you. This is a draft. I'm not quite finished with it, but this is a draft of our readings and assignments for next week. And I'll put this in the email also, but just so you can have a quick overview. You'll see the list of readings and videos and podcasts and whatever they are, as usual. In this column over here, the second column is assignment number 3, trauma-informed care. The first module is going to be due next week, but it's very short, okay? So you're going to go to this website called Cox Academy, I think it's Academy, and you'll need to create a free account. It only takes a quick minute to set up your free account. And then you're going to do lessons 1 through 5, but each lesson is just like a couple minutes long, so it's really short. And then we'll have you do just for a learning check in, a quick reflection on that. So that will be linked there. Then what I want to do is to have one of our trauma-informed modules be part of one of our classes. And I'm actually trying to line up a guest speaker for that. This will be helpful, especially, well, for everyone, but especially for those of you who are working towards your ECT qualification, because in addition to these classes, you also need to get points for your credential in ongoing professional development. And so this person who's going to come be a guest speaker is going to be able to issue you a certificate. This will be considered as a training. So you will get additional training hours. So this is actually helpful for you if you're working towards your ECT qualification. So just a little quick preview of that. That'll be in the next week or two. Yeah, so I know we're out of time, but any quick final questions before we say goodnight for the evening? Okay. Awesome. Well, just want to say thank you so much for your wonderful participation this evening and engagement. I appreciate you working really hard to stay on camera. That does help us stay connected. You hear me say that a lot, but I feel like it's important to our learning community. And I hope you have a great, wonderful rest of your week. Reach out with questions or anything, and I'll see you next time. And then Annalicia and Sierra, if you could just hang on for a quick minute afterwards, that would be great. And the rest of you have a great evening. Bye-bye. Well, I'm going to stop sharing and stop recording.